It's K8BYP with another installment in the grounding question. There have been several commenters. It's popular belief that because the radio manual says you got to ground that terminal on the back of the radio, that somehow because a technical writer in Japan or China who have no knowledge or no authority under U.S. National Electric Code said so. This ground terminal thing came, in my experience, because I was there, from about the 1970s when solid state, like car radios and CBs, came to be. That terminal on the back of the radio chassis was not there for ground. It was there for under dash mounting of a radio. The instructions were to put a perforated strap between the dash, the metal structure of the dashboard, to that thing and tighten the nut down. If it wasn't there, every time the car hit a bump, the radio would bounce up and down and eventually break something. Not a ground terminal. In general, it's bad to ground that chassis, especially if there's noise filtering in line with the power leads and noise filtering in the chassis, because it bypasses any noise filtering on the negative side. But anyway, here is Phillips television. Phillips used to be known as North American Phillips Magnavox. They absorbed Magnavox. They're a Dutch consortium, I think. Big engineering, high quality, high tech stuff sold in the US. Okay, if you're looking for authority of an owner's manual, there it is. Okay. Important safety instructions. Yada yada, don't defeat the 3-bladed plug. Protect the cords, yada yada yada. Unplug. Smart hams know this. Unplug this apparatus during lightning storms or when unused for long periods of time, because a lightning storm or a power system fault might happen when you're not nearby. Qualified service personnel, that was me to a T. I was at the top of that world. Notice to CATV system installer, attention to Article 820-40 of the National Electric Code, a specific reference to the code, and Article 800 is where CATV systems are. Read, guidelines for proper grounding, not what we say, but what the code says, and in particular specifies that cable ground shall be connected to the grounding system of the building as close to the point of cable entry as practical. We do not bring the cable TV lead in the house and ground it at the other end of the house. If that isn't obvious to you, why, there's a serious problem. Okay, example of antenna grounding as per NEC National Electric Code. Firstly, that's misleading because there is nothing in the U.S. National Electric Code 2011 that requires or even discusses antenna grounding. But let's look at this from the top down. I'm going to switch to macro so you can see this diagram better. Okay, rooftop antenna on a probably metal mast. I like wood. First thing to notice, antenna lead-in wire. That is a reference to the code. That's what the code calls it. You got a Yagi. Notice the cable is spaced away. That's required by code. Other conductors have to be kept a 6-foot minimum away from conductors that may carry lightning current. When the antennas hit, the metal mast and the ground clamp and the ground wire are going to conduct lightning current. So in theory, that lead-in has to be 6 feet away. That's impossible at the top of the antenna, so it kind of becomes a moot point. Notice antenna discharge unit instead of a vague diagram referring to an NEC section. Notice grounding conductors from the antenna discharge unit, and as similar to what's required by code. Notice they don't call out ground clamp in a section of the code, but there is a requirement to ground towers. So that's where that comes from, because what's going to get hit is both the antenna and the metal mast. You really can't ground the antenna, but it's good practice to ground a mast. Where do those go? Well, they do not go to a separate ground rod, which is a violation of code. Notice grounding conductors, grounding clamps Power Service Grounding Electrode System NEC 250, and this is what I hammer on in my grounding videos, it is two violations of NEC 250 on grounding to put a ground rod over here at the other end of the house. That's regrounding at the load. And those two ground rods cannot be bonded together if they're 75 feet apart. The maximum distance is about 8 feet. Notice the diagram. Those of you that demand authority from some company that made a book, here it is. Only grounded to the service entry ground. Only. Single point grounding. Multiple point is forbidden by Article 250-24A5. You may not put a ham radio in the other end of the house on commercial power and sink another ground rod in the ground. That's several code violations. Doesn't matter what ARRL told you, they're wrong, and they are not an authority. This is not a radio topic. It's a life safety, lightning, power line safety issue, not a radio topic. There's nothing radio about this grounding system, except that when a lightning transient hits, the frequencies are RF. And there's your diagram. People want a diagram? There it is. No separate ground rod is permitted. Now, the screaming problem here is that it's difficult to impractical to actually do this, because it's also given that antenna must be installed someplace where if the top two clamps fail and it's only sitting on the bottom and it falls some radius, that it doesn't fall on the power lines. That leads to the problem of the ground wires, which are typically number 6, being far too long and far too inductive to carry lightning current. But notice in the diagram, a tip of the hat to the code, which does not permit bending or kinking the wires. Notice they've drawn the wires with smooth radiuses. You're not permitted to bend a ground wire. It doesn't work. It will stop. It will not conduct a lightning transient. I saw a case where a ground wire was brought off a line, stapled to a pole, made a right angle turn. The lightning jumped off the wire and went down the pole. That's why. There is way too much inductance in more than a few feet of anything short of a cable as big as your arm to pass lightning current without having a significant impedance. And notice the grounding experts on YouTube can't discuss any of this, especially the electrical considerations, because they know nothing about it. They're just repeating old myths from ham radio, and again, this is not a radio topic. So there it is from the horse's mouth, or the horse's printer. And realize that these manuals, as an engineer, I've done technical writing like this, instructions. These instructions are not made by engineers sitting there with typewriters or computers. The engineers are off doing engineering. This stuff is done by technical writers, and in the case of a big company like this, they're lawyers and management. So notice the difference, not just some Mickey Mouse diagram, but specific reference to National Electric Code in the U.S. Your nation might be different, but I guarantee you the laws of physics are not different in your nation, except for the Coriolis force. Your toilet in Australia will turn the opposite direction, but that doesn't matter. So there it is. Single point grounding, no separate ground rods unless they're within about an 8-foot distance and are bonded to the electrical service drop ground rod. There it is. KBYP did it.